So here with the one and only Roan Price. Awesome. So awesome. I can't believe that we're doing it today on August 20th, 2023. Let's start by talking about kind of your background, who you are, where you go to school, what grade you're going into. Talk a little bit about that.
My name is Roan Price. I'm going into 11th grade in late August at the Episcopal School of Los Angeles, or what is now known as the School of Los Angeles. I'm 17, really enjoy writing. It's my cup of tea, but I do all matter of stuff. Yeah, I love filmmaking. I'm currently working on a TV show with a friend of mine called Math Man. It's been a project that's been in the talks for years and is only recently we've been writing and hope to shoot later in the year. And it's been a lot of fun. It started out as a comic book, and we've really, through our own growths as creators, decided to bring it to the next level as a TV show. I spent a good deal of my summer at UCLA studying screenwriting at one of their summer institutes, which is a lot of fun. Not only did I learn a lot about screenwriting in general, I got to learn a lot about UCLA and the environment there. I can confidently say it's the best college tour I've ever had.
And then how long was the program? It was
3
weeks?
weeks, yeah.
Okay. So talk a little bit, if you would, about the process of applying for, what was the name of the program and applying for?
So it was the UCLA Film and Television Institute, Writing for TV, Big Ideas for the Small Screen. Kind of a long title, but that's the full official title. In terms of the application process, I think it's a similar story for a lot of people, that no matter what you're applying for, putting yourself out there and applying for something is a vulnerable activity and can evoke a lot of nerves in somebody. And I can definitely say that was part of my process. I was like, okay, is it even worth filling out this application if I'm not going to get in? But of course, the only way that you're sure that you're not going to get in is if you don't apply. Put together my application, filled out prompts, workshop a lot of answers, and went back to the drawing board a few times. And finally, I was ready to submit what I had, and I was very happy with what I had. And wouldn't you know, I got in.
That was an exciting time.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're admitted, and what was the program like?
Yeah.
Because a lot of high schoolers think about attending summer programs, and whether or not it's at out of school they're considering going to, it reflects the college experience that they make. Can you lean into that a little bit more and then talk about your experience at UCLA?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been on a few college tours already earlier in the summer, and they've ranged from very unofficial to pretty official. Some just like walking around campus with no idea where to go, and others with a specific tour guide. And all have their benefits, but spending 3 weeks at UCLA and actually living at the dorms, not only do you get an idea of where you are and what the campus looks like, you get a feel for what waking up in the morning feels like in your commute to your classroom, and really being a part of a community. And if it's a college that you do have interest in, being a part of a community that you could potentially join later. And it's offers a lot of benefits, because I was sitting eating lunch doing my work for my class outside while I see other tours go by, and I can't help think to myself, I'm getting the real tour here.
What was that college tour experience like in general? And what were the indicators that schools were good or not good?
Especially with parents inputting opinions, I feel like colleges often speak for themselves before you even go on campus a little bit, because you have hearing all these opinions thrown around, and you're not exactly sure what to think of it at first. Touring is very important, and I think it's a very good idea to get a feel of the atmosphere of a college before you go there. And it was very, I think, easy to tell, oh, could I potentially see myself here when you go to a college? And sometimes that process took a little bit longer. So for UC Santa Barbara, I came and I'm like, oh, this is just an atmosphere that I find really cool. I'm not going to make any decisions now or anything, but could I see myself here? Yeah, it's a beautiful place, and I hear it has a good education. And then another school like Cal Poly, which is a little more, I think, agricultural based and just generally more STEM focused, I didn't quite see myself there as much. And it often, stuff like that often shows itself during the tours. And then Berkeley and Stanford, they were, right up my alley. So touring is, I think, a really valuable tool. And most of those schools I didn't have an official tour guide for, which I think is also provides its own benefits exploring on your own.
What kind of benefits do you think? Because many people will try and go on the tours, the official tours, if they're available,
Yeah.
but quite often they're not. So you
Mhm.
had the experience of going on your own tour on your own and with your parents. Talk a little bit about that.
First tip I'd say is, at least at the very least, get a map at the help desk at the visitor center. Put your name in, because now they know that you're there. And then once you have a map, you're off to the races. At an average tour, you might not be able to look at specific buildings that at your your major of interest, excuse me. You wouldn't even see those buildings potentially on a tour like that. So when you're on your own and you have a map, you can see, if I'm going to be taking theater classes, let's say, this is a place where I'd want to check out. And that's a benefit in its own. You get an idea of where you specifically as an individual would be going, and not specifically big group of people. And guided tours are nice because you have a input from an actual student, often running you through campus and student life experience. But I feel like it's almost a difference of, in a guided tour, hearing about student life and experience as opposed on your own, which is almost getting a little preview of it on your own.
Interesting perspective, very cool perspective. And I know you had a wonderful trip with your folks. You talked about theater, so let's lean into that. You're such a multi-talented guy, but this was one of the first kind of experiences I had speaking with you about this theater, which has been a love of yours for a long time. How long have you been doing the musical theater, been into, with big air quotes around it, engaging in musical theater?
Officially, in terms of doing productions, you would go back into early elementary school, but unofficially.
What was the first production you did in early elementary school?
There's always those little stuff with no name, because why would get the rights if it's a bunch of kindergartens? But something to do with pirates, I'm sure. I'd say in an unofficial capacity, I've been doing theater like since I was very early. I was from a very young age into Les Miserables, which is quite the musical to be into from a young age in terms of the subject matter. But I think hearing the music from that so much just put me into a kind of transfer. Okay, this is music for me. And from there, it's just any time there's a theater opportunity, I'd take it. And it's just blossomed into something that I do when there's an opportunity for. So anytime there's a musical, I'll be a part of it, just because it's almost habitual at this point.
And it's something that you love.
Oh, yes. Yeah, of course. It's habitual in the sense like, okay, I got to do the musical this year. There's really nothing like being up on stage and getting to play a character that it has its own story to tell. It's a lot of fun. It's fun to sing, at least for me, because it's so fun to sing. And it's just a part of my life that I think it'd be a little hard to leave behind if I had to.
What do you love? And we'll talk about piano, which is a new venture for you in a minute.
Yeah.
What do you love most about singing?
I think, and this goes in tandem with piano, because I love lots of music and I wouldn't call theater my favorite genre. But I think my favorite part about singing is, goes in tandem with listening and finding music that you love. And if you have the ability to sing, it takes the music that you love and, for lack of sounding like selfish or anything, like almost makes it about you. You gain a personal connection with the music that you enjoy. And when it comes to theater, you're learning to enjoy new music. And anyone can be honest, like, they enjoy certain musicals more than others. But if there's a song from a musical that you really love and you get to sing it, then you're a part of that music.
Case in point, most recently, and I was fortunate, as we live in the same city, to see you play the lead in. Why don't you tell us all about that play that you were in, and what the name of it was, and what role you played?
I played the role of Danny Zuko in the hit musical Grease, and I auditioned, and I was this is a school production, so no Broadway. I'm getting there. I auditioned, put in my best effort after like lots of practice, and I got the part, and I was obviously very happy with the rest of the cast. Most of them were my friends, and I knew that it was going to be a fun experience from the beginning. And yeah, from rehearsals to putting on the show, it was a great experience. Everyone there was a new era of professionality or professionalism. I couldn't tell you what the proper pronunciation, but it was everyone. Okay, this is Greece. This is a big deal. This is a big musical. We're gonna put this on, and it was a lot of fun. Everyone went into it really excited. Everyone was having fun the whole way through, and it turned out great. It taught me a lot about musical theater and working with others, because that was one of the roles I played where you have to really focus on the other characters, as well as making yourself look completely non-interested with the other characters, or disinterested with the other characters.
Talk about that for a moment. You and I talked about that a lot because this is an ensemble piece.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big role.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of, for lack of a better word, there are a lot of big roles in that. And your co-star, maybe you can talk a little bit about your interaction with her. Now, you were at the time still in 10th grade. You're a rising junior now.
Mm-hmm.
You were still in 10th grade, and you go to a fairly small school, but that's a big role for a 10th grader to get. And one of the things that we spoke about afterwards is how generously you shared the stage with everybody else. But you put it very aptly, like, talk more about that, about sharing the stage and still playing that role in a very strong way and how it all balances out.
Anyone who's done theater or improv or anything of that variety knows that the most important thing that you can do as an actor is make your other stage partners look as best possible. And if everyone's doing their job, everyone looks great. Yeah. Aside from solos, one of the best draws about theater is interaction and dialogue with other people on stage. And you need to make sure that when you're in those dialogue scenes or even on stage dancing with other people, that not only are you just exclusively not getting in their way, but you're also giving them space to do their own thing. Because it's really just one of those situations where all the actors on stage are more than the sum of their parts. Because if everyone's making each other look great, then everyone looks great. I guess that's the main takeaway.
Beautifully put. And just for the sake of context, this was a fairly small stage, was it not?
Oh, it was a small stage.
How many people were in the cast? That was a cast of
30, 35?
30, 35.
Yeah.
And you go to a fairly small school. And what would you estimate the size of this? It was a black box theater, yes?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And how big was the stage for this cast of 35?
Not big enough, I'll say that much. Yeah.
So for big song and dance numbers, and there were quite a lot of them, but I'm thinking you're the one that I want. There was a lot of dancing. You're a tall guy. How tall are you?
6'3". Yeah.
Okay, so you're 6'3". So there's a lot of space to share. And talk about not just sharing the physical space, but again, sharing the kind of emotional space. And while you're in the front, still helping, because there were young kids in that show. How young were the youngest?
6th grade.
Okay. So really helping everybody look good and still allowing the kids in the back, the 6th graders in the back to shine. Were you conscious of that process? Because you're dancing, you're singing, you're acting, you're a triple threat. And there were a lot of triple threats in there, but really helping everybody else to do that. What was that process like in real time as you were doing? Because it took place over the space of 3 days. So how many shows?
Yeah, 3 or 4 shows. Yeah.
Were you aware that there were a lot of little kids in this show? Talk about that, because that comes to roost in the workshop that you most recently ran. Lean into that a little bit, if you will.
Yes. First, in terms of just sharing physical space and everyone being crowded on stage, I've had experiences in the past where it's been even worse, and you really just have to rely on your choreographer to make sure everyone's not running into each other. But in terms of sharing space with younger kids on stage, it's just a few things that you have to keep in mind. One, I think this is definitely an area where I see a lot of people struggle with, is it's just a high school production. And if someone trips, as long as they're okay, someone trips, or if someone messes up a line, nothing bad is really going to come as a result of that, because you're in a high school production. And if everyone knows that, then there's a lot less nerves and a lot less stuff even happens in that case. You just got to treat it with, okay, I'm a high schooler, middle schooler, and my job is to meet or raise the expectations of all the parents in the audience. And I will say that's often a low bar. It's really not too hard. So you just have to just have fun, because the worst thing a parent can watch is a bunch of kids on stage just hating what they're doing and getting really mad when they mess up. Yeah, so that's the first thing. And especially when you're dealing with younger kids, things are bound to happen and you just got to take them as they come. But as far as working with kids, I think younger kids have a lot to offer, and especially being a teenager and sometimes feeling very old for your age. Being a teenager is just always thinking more than everyone else. And I think that often leads a lot of people to just look past the younger kids and not seeing what they have to offer. And when it comes to my workshop, as we talk about later, or even just giving the younger kids the space that they need and the time that they need to actually perform and show their talents on stage, it's really important, because the more opportunity, and I was lucky to have at a younger age to show your talents, the more talented you will be later, I'd say. And it's just, don't count them out. That's what I'd say. Yeah.
Beautifully put. I'm really intrigued by what you had to say. We've spoken about this before, but every time we get together in our sessions and our mentoring sessions, you articulate it in a different way about younger kids have a lot to offer. I do want to come back to Math Man because it's so awesome in every possible way. But let's talk about your workshop, which took place not too long ago. Can you tell us about how it came about, what you called it? You came up with a brilliant name, brilliant domain name. Walk us through that.
Yeah, so it started off as just a very vague idea that came from you, Dan, that was like, what if you have all this stuff that you love? What if you just pass it on to the younger kids that you've already worked with in the past? Why not? And maybe make a little bit of money while you do it. Why not? And as soon as he said that, I was on board. There was a stage where it was, I was doing other stuff. I was at UCLA, where it was in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, I'll worry about this later, because it does seem daunting. But I was pretty on board from the start. So when I came back from UCLA, we really hit the ground running, starting off with marketing, which started out with building an email, which surprisingly technical process that needs figuring out. But we did that. The program was called Roan Price. And for this weekend, which was focused on poetry, it was the weekend poetry workshop. And we got Roan at roanwrites.com as an email. Then we made a flyer. I ran it through a first draft, then worked with Dan a little bit, refining, smoothing out the edges, and sent it out to prospective parents, parents of younger students at my school. And it turned into people emailing and signing up for it. And it was then I really started focusing on the curriculum, what I'd actually be teaching. And for this specific weekend, because I do plan on running it more potentially and focusing on different subjects in terms of the poetry of it all, just compiling poems, poets, forms of poetry. We focused on haikus, limericks, and hero couplets, which
that was the structure. That was the structure of this particular one. So I want to come back to the flow. You're in a great flow state. But what was so there was this was a 2-day program?
This was a 2-day weekend program, 3 hours a day.
3 hours a day. And what did you charge? What did you charge the parents for the?
So I charged $47 for the parents, and that just because I'm getting the program, starting it off, and I want the experience more than anything, especially in the earlier sessions, decided to donate all the money that I gained from it to my theater program at my school. And that way parents who, may know me from theater but don't know me as a teacher can feel a little more confident about what they're sending their kids to, if they know that worst case scenario, I'm just making a small donation to the theater program that my kid is a part of. But
it was also a credibility builder, because as
exactly.
I recall, one of the new administrators at your school, whom you took the initiative to write, came back and said, this sounds great, but it's unproven. Once you've gotten it off the ground, there's a certain chicken and egg quality to it. And so you had to, in your own mind, prove that it worked.
Exactly.
And then giving $47 to the school, while it wasn't the money in your pocket, it was proof of the pudding, to use school thing. And there's a certain joy to that, right? Being able to give back to a school that you love a lot. What was the outcome that you put together? Talk about the curriculum, and you mentioned the 3 types of poetry. So the idea was to come in, and at the end of those 2 days, your mentees, because I'm mentoring you, but you were mentoring, and you use specifically the word mentoring in this detailed curriculum put together. and the very detailed brochure, very impressive brochure that you worked. Talk a little bit about the process of the brochure and then the process of creating the curriculum, and then talk about, if you would, what the outcome was that you guaranteed the kids would have.
Yeah. Starting out with the brochure, I can't even imagine looking at the first draft and then looking at it now, because while it was all right for the first time, it definitely changed a good deal for the better. Program wise, you end up learning a lot while teaching your own workshop. I'd prepared a slideshow, tons of poems, lots of stuff to talk about and this would be for the entire weekend. And within the first day, I ended up talking through all of that stuff, which was great. We made a really good pace, and great first day. And I'm like, oh, okay, what do I have for tomorrow? So spent that night making a whole different part of it. And what started out as covering just haikus, limericks, and hero couplets turned into all of those, plus acrostic poems, quatrains, and a bunch of different other poets that we looked at. And I'm very happy with it. What it turned out, the claim of the program was, you'll do this and you'll learn a lot about poets, but you'll walk away with these three types of poems in your writing, and you will have done that. These will have been your poems. You will be a poet. Write poems, you're a poet. And I couldn't have asked for a better first run through, because not only did we fulfill that claim, I made a certificate, gave it to them, and it was perfect. But we wrote so many poems. It was great. And I had the opportunity to write some poems on my own. They're writing poems. It's just a lot of fun, resounding success, and I will do it again.
And we spoke on the night between, and I remember our conversation being something along the lines of, Dan, I've run through everything in the curriculum that we had planned, and what do you think we should do? And I said, this is your program. And you touched on this earlier, that little kids, younger kids, one of the kids in your program, as I recall, was a rising 8th grader or 7th grader?
Rising 8th grader, yeah.
Rising 8th grader. And one of my suggestions was, have you thought about the idea of his teaching you something on the second day? Was that something that you implemented or considered, and did it pan out? Or I don't know whether...
You asked me that recently, because my first answer would have been no. But the more I thought about it, the more I think yes, because when we weren't doing poetry, we took a few breaks, and we both go to the same school, and our school is turbulent at times in terms of everything happening there. And one of my students is just telling me about different stuff that's happening in school, and his perception of it, and his social life there. And while I thought to myself at first, he probably didn't give me a chance to teach me too much academically, I think he did end up teaching me a lot about what it's like to be a rising 8th grader in 2023, which is great. And I love to hear stuff like that.
Do you remember any of the lessons or some of the takeaways that you had? Because it wasn't too long ago that you were that 8th grader, but if you recall, we've spoken about this before, to the 8th grader, the rising junior, the rising 11th grader is a god. Even though it may be a separation of 1,000 days, it's go back to when you were that age, and it was like, wow, you're so old and experienced. Well, how did that dynamic show up, or was it just cool from the start? What was that dynamic like for this particular student who was in that workshop?
I was really lucky to have a student who was really not only open to learn poetry, but also pretty social. So we talked a lot about all matter of things, and I didn't feel like I was having to talk down to anyone, and I wasn't talking down to anyone. I was as if he was a peer that I just didn't know the subject. So everything was very fluid, and I almost didn't feel like there was much of a real mentee difference. It was just, in this specific case scenario, I'm gonna mentor you on this thing. And it was great hearing about what it's like to be a rising 8th grader, and social dynamics for school for them, because when I was a rising 8th grader, it was COVID, and I didn't get to experience that. At least I had my own experience of that. A social time that I had never got to live for myself, that I got to hear about, which was nice to hear.
So and that's really cool. There's a great photo. You've done the marketing, you've learned some business stuff that you just walked into. I remember when we talked about this, that you talked about it being cool and terrifying at the same time. You'd never done this, but you walked into it. And the email, that it was all yours, but we worked on it together, right? It was just like a gen nudge.
Well,
but you had a lot of fun with that.
That's one thing that, I don't know, me working with you a lot is grade is, I'd say everything I do is always coming from me. It's always my words. It's always my intention. And it's always pretty much me. But even from stuff as little as making a typo to stuff as overarching as what are you actually saying here? This is how you appeal to a parent who's gonna send their kid to a summer camp. Stuff that I, as a rising junior, why would I know this stuff? And I find myself like out of meetings and out of our sessions together thinking, oh, now I do know this stuff. And it's always coming from me, but now I know tools to teach me. And
it seemed as though, and that was on the marketing side, right? You marketed, you created a brochure and campaigned. It was a campaign. It was not just the brochure, it was the reach out initiatives to the parents. Your mom helped a little bit by making some connections, but it was really, you drove that train. And one of the students in your program was somebody whom you shared the stage with on Greece. There's a wonderful photo among the many that you shot of the two of you sitting at the table crafting poetry together. And one of your students is looking at you with what appears to be like almost adoration, but just like here are two peers kind of sharing this wonderful moment of crafting poetry together. And it was a really wonderful thing to see because, as we've spoken about before, and you were also mentoring him. Yes, you were mentoring this guy. Exactly. So it's the communications part, the entrepreneurship part, and the mentoring part. But you touched on something that's really important. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this. That yes, mentoring in a sense is hierarchical, right? Because you're older and you have more experience. But there's also that, and you're a martial artist as well. Yes, you trained in martial arts early on.
Yes, It's been a little while. It's been a year or two. It's definitely a part of me.
What martial art did you train in?
Mixed martial arts, a little bit of everything, but I couldn't put exactly into words everything that we learned, but it was a wide range.
So fair to say that you're a deadly street killer? Would that be a fair?
I don't know how deadly, but I'm a street killer.
Okay. That's going to go on the college application for sure. But where I'm going with this is that there's that dojo model, right? Where it's a side to side thing. And I think that's something that showed up for you. Was that something, or rather, was that something that showed up in this relationship during the course of the years?
As opposed to if you're like teaching a class at a school where you have to lay down the law because God knows that there's going to be at least 3 unruly kids. You really have to establish your place above the other students. And it's important to do that with reason. But in a workshop like this, where there's not as many students as a class and you're getting to know everyone on an individual level, it opens the opportunity for a lot more collaboration instead of specific do this direction, and that widely beneficial to just flow of everything. Because as class went on, we were talking while writing poetry about whatever, just having conversation, and that's something that you don't do with your teachers, and that's just one of the biggest benefits. It's definitely not hierarchy.
Yeah, it's the peer model. So it again, you've got the marketing thing, you've got the communications piece, both with the parents and the child, and then you've got the mentorship piece. And you talked about learning on your feet. Like it's the old adage that the best way to learn something is to teach it. Can you speak a little bit more about that and how that showed up? That's shown up in your life in other ways, but how that showed up in your workshop and maybe has shown up in other ways in your life.
In terms of the best way to learn something is to teach it?
Yeah. Or how that showed up maybe in your productions or in just your life or in the workshop.
Yeah, first starting out with the workshop, while I do enjoy poetry and I've read a good deal of poetry, in the process of creating the curriculum, I read a lot and I learned a lot. And yeah, I just generally learned a lot from creating the curriculum, because if I'm going to teach this, I got to know it. And I'm not going to know the entire curriculum for a poetry workshop offhand in my experience. So I spent time studying and learning all of that. And I came away learning a lot from it. In an environment like UCLA, the best way to learn is to teach. I think that came up in a lot of conversations about, what TV shows have you watched and what do you like about that? You're not exactly teaching, you're explaining your side of what you enjoy in what you consume. And that provides its own benefits, for sure. It's very much a true adage.
Yeah, and to the mentor-mentee relationship, and we talked about this very early on. I'm quite a bit older than you, and while I'm mentoring you towards college, with the idea that college is one step along the way, it's a byproduct of my program, and we've talked about part of it is that you and I will be working together. To my good fortune, hopefully to yours as well, once you matriculate to college, and with the idea that you may be mentoring other kids once we work together. But I've learned a lot from you. Case in point, you've recommended TV shows to me. Can you talk about one specifically that you recommended to me that I'm just bananas about, and why you recommended that one to me?
Which is Nathan For You. All right. Nathan For You is a show I started watching since canceled new show, but watching years ago, and has remained one of my all-time favorite TV shows ever. And it's, basic plot of the TV show, this socially awkward businessman, business guru-esque person goes to smaller businesses and recommends ideas of and ways that they could potentially up their business or make more money. And with the catch that a lot of these ideas are pretty unconventional. There's just one off the top of my head, like a maid cleaning service, but it's pitched as only taking 5 minutes, but there'll be 60 maids in your house. And so they're just in and out really quickly. And so many, there's 4 seasons worth of episodes of these just wacky concepts. And the best part about the show easily is it's all interactions with real people and the way that people react to these stuff, and the general actually bonds that he forms with some people along the way on some of these episodes is really like nothing else. So that's definitely one show that I'm like, oh, you haven't seen Nathan For You, which a lot of people haven't. It's not too well known. It's a Comedy Central show. I constantly recommend it.
Yeah, and I loved it. I think the first episode you recommended to me was the electronic store.
Yeah, exactly.
Was that it? And I loved it. But I guess the reason I'm bringing it up is that in these mentorship relationships, and you talked about this with one of your students in your workshop, there are feedback loops, right? There's a co-creation process. There's a co-creation process, and that sort of replication process, or the fractal geometry of it too, is that you had a co-creation process that went on in your own workshop. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially doing all my material for the 2 days on day one, it led me to think, oh, okay, what do you want to learn? Because I asked him that. I'll be honest. We made a really good time today. We got through the weekend's agenda in a day. Is there anything in specific that you'd want to learn? And that influenced what I taught the next day.
Which is, and we've talked about this before, one of the most effective ways that you can build a program or a course is to build the plane as you fly it. Yes. We talked about that. And you instantly locked onto that.
Yeah.
You want to know what to build. Ask your clients, what is it you want next? They will tell you. And I'll ask you this. You don't say you're not shy. You're not a shy guy. But how does asking play into your life, just in general? Are you afraid to ask? And when you ask, how does that show up for you, whether it comes in the form of academics or social life or anything like that?
I think a lesson, because the best way to sound this, I do pretty well in school. And a lesson that's very good to learn about school is showing your teachers that you don't know something isn't a weakness, and it isn't telling them that you're not smart. The best thing that you can do for your teachers and for yourself is ask your teachers questions, because that way you learn. And if your teachers know that you're willing to learn, they're willing to teach. And that's invaluable. It's so important. With running a workshop, it's a balancing act of asking questions in terms of make sure they know you know what you're doing, but also make sure that they know that you're willing to cater experience to them. Most of the creative work I do is collaborative. It's probably one of the best ways I work. And that's all about asking, where can I pick up your slack? The other person asks where they can pick up your slack. Can you pick up my slack? Asking, oh, does this line work here? Should this part be later? And we'll talk about Math Man later, but it's asking is collaboration, and asking is, be willing to be asked of, I'll say. Don't have it all go one way where you're just asking other people for things. Life works best if everyone's helping each other. So be a part of that ecosystem, I'd say, and be a part of that ecosystem of helping, but also willing to receive help.
Beautifully said. And the perfect segue. We will go to Math Man. You also created a play.
Oh, yeah.
I won't spoil it. What was the name of that play? And
it's called Home Away.
And you very generously invited me to a table reading of that.
To a table reading.
Your teacher was involved. Talk about how that was created, what the plot was of the play, what it was like to put it on its feet.
I was lucky enough to take a playwriting class last year at my school. It's right up my alley. And given that I love to collaborate, brought on 2 of my friends to it, and we decided, okay, let's make a play. And I will say, within the context of it being a school assignment and it being for a class where I have classes where I love learning, but it's a lot. and sometimes you want a break. I think taking this playwriting class and working on what we did work on, which I'll explain in a second, it's very much a time to let your mind go a little bit and just put words down on the page and have fun with it. So I wrote a play called with two of my friends called Home Away. It was about a friend of mine recently. His dad got remarried in Portugal, and we're like, okay, Portugal, why not? Let's just talk about that. And the concept of the play was, okay, our friend is in Portugal and I'm with my other friend, and our friend in Portugal gets kidnapped and the kidnappers want ransom money. My friend in LA, we go and we save him. And pretty interesting plot for a play at a school. But there's a lot of ground to work on here. What about a scene in the plane? What about a scene in a hotel? Just whatever we wanted. And just a pure unbridled comedy that is just fun the whole way through, doesn't take itself too seriously, doesn't worry about getting an Emmy or a Tony, I don't know. And yeah, it was just lots of fun and just took our mind off of it, and it ended off really nicely with us casting all the roles for a table read and bringing over a bunch of people to watch it. It's lots of fun.
It was lots of fun, and one of my recollections in you had your teacher cast
Yeah.
in the play as well. Two teachers cast in the play.
So I
Yes.
had my Spanish teacher read, who's fluent in Portuguese, read some of the only lines in Portuguese, because while it does take place in Portugal, only one of the characters, which is the hotel concierge, speaks Portuguese. And then the playwriting teacher, who also does a lot of the theater stuff as the narrator and who's reading stage directions. And she's been the person who, while we're reading in the playwriting class, who has read up until that point, read all of it the whole way through and been the one reading it. It felt like the right fit. And it feels great because I've created good relationships with teachers, to have them be willing to contribute to something that I create. That's a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun, and my recollection is that she also stepped in for one of the roles in Greece when I think the cast member couldn't
Oh
make it
yeah,
that night.
exactly. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because it was great.
Yeah, it's a funny story. This teacher had actually played that specific role in high school when she did the play for her own high school. And while I'm sure not everything was memorized, but she did a really good job when one of the senior girls who was playing the role, I forget exactly what the role was, but had to step out for, I'm not exactly sure what it was, but for the night, the teacher stepped in and is like, you couldn't even have told the difference. She did a great job. And I'm really privileged to be at a school where teachers are willing to collaborate with their students outside breaking that hierarchy when it's right. Because hierarchy is important sometimes in terms of education, but there's times when it can break, and those are cool moments.
Yeah, it is important. Teachers should be teachers.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Students should be students, right?
I'm also an advocate for teachers laying down the law when it needs to be laid down, but also genuinely having a connection with their students.
Talk about boundaries, because that's an important distinction that you've made. Like, where are the boundaries and how do those get enforced, and how do you respect those, and when is it important to respectfully challenge those, both in school and in other parts of life, and as a son?
Yeah, boundaries are infinitely important when it comes to every single facet of a person's life, especially social dynamics with friends. Very important. In terms of teachers, stay very polite over email, limit emails when they're needed. I think that's a good idea. Respect your teachers, but don't be afraid of your teachers. That's definitely a line that don't be afraid of your teachers. That's bad. You should, yeah, and in terms of education, just put your best self out there. But friendships, just be receptive to what other people are feeling. That's really it. And be willing to, don't change yourself, but be willing to adapt to people's comfortability. I guess mentor-mentee relationships, I feel like it's my job, although Dan is very good about this in terms of everything is my own. In terms of what I do, I do feel it's my responsibility. Whatever I want to do, I want it to be mine. I want the idea of, like, for the plot or whatever to be mine. And I think stuff is better that way when it's mine, and then I can work on it with Dan to a point where it gets to a point that I want it to. Because I think one of the most valuable things in life is experience. And as I grow older, I'm gaining more and more. This one thing that you can't really count on just you as an individual. You haven't experienced as much as some people.
But I want to switch tracks for a
Mhm.
second here because you've talked about math. Well, let's go to piano for a second
Okay.
because this was something you jumped into with both feet at the
Mhm.
very beginning of our relationship. And a recollection was that this was something that had been on your bucket list, but you weren't sure quite how to jump into that. So, what was our approach, but again, led by you, and how did that show up?
Yeah, my experience with piano is it being my favorite instrument to listen to, hearing it in pretty much all of my favorite songs, especially in classical. And you hear piano in everything, avoiding it. And I'd always wanted to learn. I was always in the mindset that, there's always kids that I've learned when they're like 3 years old. And I'm like, okay, then 16, now 17. What am I going to do to learn piano? I'm going to be so far behind. It's almost not worth it. And I'm like, I've had that thought process for a very long time. And I thought, okay, I was thinking about when I was like 10 years old, thinking the same thing. What if I had just jumped in at 13 and then I would have had 3 years of experience under my belt? So then I was like, okay, I have a really bad keyboard right now. What if I just start practicing? Download one of those apps and see what I can do. And I jumped right into it. I learned how to read basic sheet music a little bit, nothing too advanced. I still don't know anything too advanced. And it's one of those things that I'm definitely gonna focus on more in a more concentrated matter as I grow older. But no, it did turn into me just learning more, eventually collaborating with Dan, who had advice on what keyboard to buy if I'm actually want to take it more seriously, which I am taking it more seriously. And I bought it. Feels great. Good job, Dan. But I just decided to dive into the deep end a little bit with it, and all the better for it.
All the better for it in a lot of ways. And
Mhm.
just to be specific, this was just a recommendation on my part that
Mhm.
learning piano, whether or not you take lessons, and
Yeah.
again, being a lifelong pianist who cannot read music, but has had the good fortune to play a lot of kind of bars and clubs and a lot of really terrible dive bars. My recommendation was get yourself an 88 weighted key, which are now very inexpensive.
Yeah.
And unless I'm wrong, you and your folks agreed to split the cost
Yeah.
of this, kind of entry level Yamaha. Walk through what the process was like. Was it we're going to just do it, or was it a discussion over a couple of weeks? And where is it in your room now? And
It's you might have seen me looking over there at it. It's right over there. It's really chair's distance away. But I'm very fortunate enough to have parents who embrace all of my ventures. It was a discussion of course, my parents want me to know how to play the piano. Like, why wouldn't they? And I was very passionate about, okay, I want to do this and I'll put up half of the money. And if you do too, then I can actually start making some real progress. And it was easy as that. Excuse me.
yeah, I hope you're going to be okay there.
Yeah.
And we also talked about the discussion between music and math, which is something you're really good at.
Mhm.
It may not be something that you're going to major in school. It
Yeah.
likely won't be, but it does show up in a lot of different ways. Again, we've talked about the cross fertilization between your passion for writing, your passion for
Mhm.
music, your passion for a lot of things. And just we've spoken. I see Stevie every week we meet just for the benefit of the people watching it there every week between Disco Elysium and the right of it
Mhm.
in our frame here. There's a different album that either you or your dad and your mom also were music lovers.
Mhm.
Something shows up there. And
Yeah.
so we've talked about taking imperfect action and just jumping in and
Mhm.
learning that. And is that something you're excited about doing over time, even if it's just sitting down and knocking
Yeah,
out some chords and
absolutely.
progressions?
It's something that through distraction and all matter of other things, going to UCLA, running a workshop, writing Math Man, which we'll talk about, it's something that is put on the back burner a little bit sometimes, but I always come back to it.
Before we get to Math Man, because it's so cool, let's talk about the restaurant reviews.
Yeah, because that
Because
actually
this
leads
was
into Math
something,
Man.
the restaurant reviews lead into Math Man. And
Yeah.
they're, in some ways, restaurant reviews, something else disguised as restaurant reviews. Can you talk a little bit about what they're called, what they are, how they play into what's served at your school, and what they.
Our school has some people think it's a benefit, some people think it's the most ridiculous thing they've ever heard. But every lunchtime, we have a kitchen staff that prepares us food, and we aren't allowed to bring our own like lunch boxes, or can't bring a PB&J from home. That's just not something that's done. And besides dietary restrictions, and if you're vegan or something like that, everyone's eating the same thing every day. And we have my friend and I constantly working on everything together. Had the unique opportunity of having something that's within our school the most relatable, because we're all eating the same thing every day. Not the same meal every day, but everyone's eating the same meal. Like,
Same meal that's served.
Yeah, exactly.
They change the meals, but everybody's
Exactly
what's served that day. Okay.
Exactly. And we decided, okay, we both love writing. That's what we do. We just write. So we said, okay, let's just review the lunches every day. And it started out very simple. Just, okay, what did we like about the meal? Every day we gave it a rating. But as the more we wrote, the longer we wrote. And it was on Instagram. And it was just entire like full blocks of text about what we enjoyed about the food. And then we decided, okay, what if we change what we're doing a little bit here and starting off on these reviews, talk about the food a little bit, but then just go off on a complete different spiel about whatever is happening at the school and whatever events are happening, mostly nonsensical and just wild, and oftentimes just made up. But I think the best way I put it is just food reviews that were thinly veiled Trojan horses for complaints or comments about the life of a sophomore. Yeah, we took a break from writing the reviews to focus on other things, which we'll talk about, but I'm really proud of them, and it was a lot of fun writing them and reached a pretty big audience within our school.
And on Instagram, and there were a lot of them. How many did you create? And when did you start doing them?
Now. We started doing, I'd say, coming back from winter break.
Okay, of last year. So my recollection, because you shared them with me, and with a lot of laughter, we went through them. Mm-hmm. And the other thing too is that my observation was that they went from just being about the school to these political rants and just.
Sorry, I'm finding 12.
Yeah. Okay. I think they were closer to 12. 15. I could be wrong.
No, not more than 12.
Okay. 15, but they started off about whether it was sloppy Joe, and that was the kickoff. And you and your friend, we'll keep his name private for the time being.
Yeah.
And you've been friends for a long time. Mm-hmm. There's this great photo of the two of you sitting in these lazy boy chairs side by side. He was also in the play.
Yeah.
Improvising his way through. He had a very unique role. But you're dear friends, but you have very different writing styles. So I wonder if two things, if you could talk about the way you collaborate, and also where these restaurant reviews veered off wildly, and then how that played into Math Man, where we want to go.
Yeah,
how it's shown up.
First off, I'll say that there was 31 31 food reviews in total, which is a good amount considering how much we were writing for each one, and the fact that we were writing every day, alternating which writer. In terms of collaborating while writing, I've explored a lot of different processes of writing with other people. In terms of it being an essay or something, not college essays yet, but first off, talking with you, Dan, I've explored one of the concepts of me writing something.
So I had to wipe my camera. Can you start off again with you, Dan?
With you, Dan, I've had the chance to explore a type of collaborative writing, which is me writing something and then workshopping it with another person. And that is very good. It's great for a mentor-mentee situation, but in other situations for Home Away, which we talked about, that was written it was all written on a call with a friend, almost line by line. What should I write here? And just on the same document on Google Docs, very unprofessionally, just writing in the moment with someone else. Then with food review, the food reviews, each review was written on alternating days by another person, by each of us. And while we weren't writing the same reviews together, we linked the reviews and we talked about other reviews within our reviews. And something that's a common factor when I'm working with my friend is we always have kind of an overarching idea of where we want to go with something, and we work within the bounds of that idea. So although we do have, I think, pretty different writing styles in a lot of ways, while we are working within the bounds of the particular idea or the plot of what we want to write, it's distinct yet intertwined.
I think it's a beautiful way of putting it, and I've only seen you and your friend, who shall not be named, just for the sake of anonymity right now, and my observation. And also, I will say this about your school and the kids I meet, whom I've had the good fortune to meet, their manners are lovely. Like they don't know me from a hole in the ground, but the couple of times I've shown up, both at Greece and at the reading of Home Away, they've come up, they've looked me in the eye. Didn't I see you there? And it's a pleasure to meet you. And it's just, I don't want to say kids these days, but it's just lovely to have eye contact and shaking hands, and may I walk you to your seat. Yeah. And What it reflects is great manners and great sort of personal interaction. And these play out. Do you agree? Would you agree? What's your hit on it? You may completely disagree. I'm learning these skills at an early age.
Oh, yeah, I think it's definitely a good environment. Of course, there's complaints. I haven't met a single person who hasn't complained about their high school. But yeah, no,
Yeah, that would be weird. That would be weird if people didn't complain
yeah,
about them.
no, it's everyone. But I've had the benefit of being treated nicely by all of my peers for a while now.
But I guess what I was going to say is my observation of you and your dear friend with whom you live,
Anonymous friend.
your anonymous friend, right? He here shall not be named, although
Yeah.
I'd love to name him because he's got a great, cool name. Are you at the same grade on the same grade?
No, he's a grade younger than me.
He's a grade younger than you, right?
And I think we're actually pretty similar in age, but he's coming directly from a boarding school. And so we take a lot of the same classes, but he is in now 10th grade. But yeah, no, there's never been a real separation there. One thing about high school that if you're going into high school that that you learn is that your social situation that up until that point was often just your specific grade expands into 4 grades. Because I have friends in probably each of the high school grades, for sure.
And would you say that the relationships that you're forging in high school, and it may be a function of the fact that you go to a fairly small high school, but would you say that the experience of being able to forge these relationships, close and not so close, whether they're within the same discipline, is a great model for the kind of relationships that you'll be able to forge academically, social, moving forward in college and in life?
Absolutely, without a doubt. And high school's learning how to socialize, how to interact with other people. Some people don't learn that till college. But yeah, I think as long as you have respect for yourself and how you're being treated by others, there's really no benefit into talking to as many people as you can and forging friendships. No need to limit yourself in that. I have old friends from elementary school, known for 8 years. And then I have friends as recent as a month ago. There you go.
That you cultivate. You touch on something really important, and then I want to move into Math Man, which is just so representative of so many of the things that you do, but in and of itself fascinating. You talked about respect for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you could speak about the way that you've cultivated it, how you view the importance of that in life, and what advice you would give other people who are struggling with forming that. It's tough to be a teenager right now. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So talk about the ways in which maybe that's been a challenge or not been a challenge for you, and the importance of cultivating respect for yourself, which shows up in different ways, and how that informs and impacts the way that you have grown as a young man.
Yeah, as happy as I am now in my current social situations, I haven't always been this happy. I've been to schools in the past that have really treated me badly. Be honest, the public school situation was, I just think, not for me. I couldn't learn how I learned there. I was treated really badly by other students. It wasn't great. And then going from that directly into a Catholic, like a very religious Catholic school that honestly flaunted values that I don't really support in a lot of ways. And just, I've been a victim of bullying, as much as I feel like saying victim of bullying is, I don't know. But it's true. I don't like to think of it that seriously because I feel like I've gained a lot from that. Bullying's bad. There you go, the easiest thing to say of all time, but learned a lot from that. I've learned how to stand up for myself a little bit more, having suffered through bad times resulting in bullying. And
even though that you are a deadly street killer.
Exactly. No, who knows how deadly. But yeah, no, I can attribute my confidence to just coming out of unfortunate social situations like that. Because if you're doing your best and you're doing what you can in really bad situations, and then you're all of a sudden thrust into a environment where you're thriving, then there's nothing that can stop you, really.
Beautifully said. Let's talk about Math Man, which was one of the very first things that I think you showed me before I met, after the show, after when we were meeting outside. And originally you showed me some of the panels for Math Man.
Yeah.
And they were just mind-blowing. So can you talk about Math Man, who the character is, how it began, the origin, what the panels were like, who drew them? Yeah, please just go on about that.
Math Man, the first thing I'll say is just takes all matter of forms and has changed so much from the very beginning. But Math Man started as a character that my anonymous friend was drawing in the margins of his math notebook during math. And the more I think about it, Math Man did spring out of our math class, given the fact that my friend and I had gotten all of our math work done early, or usually get it done early in each class, and are left with some extra time to do whatever we please. And that often ended in just doodling. I will say I'm not the best artist in terms of physical art, but I am more of a writer. So what my friend and I decided to do is, okay, here's just this character we wrote on the margin of the notebook. And then here's just a bunch of terms we've been learning in math class that we understand in the context of math class. But what if we just threw them around in like this comic book? Oh no, there's a radian over there. And like radians are the enemies of Math Man. It's a very weird and wacky universe, but it turned in from a doodle, it turned in like to a comic that we wrote a few panels for, and that was fun. But we didn't have any real course to take with it. And that was the idea. And we were like, okay, we want to write an actual like debut comic for it, because, you know, we've been writing comics for it, but let's write like in full color an actual Math Man issue. And we were going to do that, but then I was off to UCLA. And at UCLA, well, not only was I writing my own script for something specific to that, I also had a lot of free time to just explore the campus and enjoy that whole part of it. And learning screenwriting at UCLA, when you're constantly surrounded by screenwriting and software for screenwriting, I just give my friend a call and tell him, okay, no, let's just write the movie. And he's like, okay, yeah, let's just write the movie. Why not? So we start talking about it, brainstorming. He comes to UCLA. We go to the library at UCLA, go into one of the rooms with a whiteboard, write out every character's relationships with one another. He comes a second day. We do that whole thing again, but like a completely different idea because we decided we didn't like the first one. And it's now just been, we've shifted to a 9-episode format for it, because we both generally like, because it was already going to be at least a 3-hour movie, because we wanted to give Math Man the most time possible, because it's just we love world building. 2-hour, 1.5-hour movie wouldn't have been enough. Plus the TV show format that gives us the opportunity to shoot the episodes, have a fully produced episode before we have every single episode out, and we can put those out. But yeah, we've been writing pretty consistently. We've restarted writing so many times. And yeah, in talks, he went to a different camp, made friendships there that are going to help actually shoot the thing. And we're friends with a band, and we've commissioned them to make the theme song for Math Man. And it's coming together really nicely. We still have a long road ahead, but if we both get into our film class next year, then I think that will probably jumpstart it as well. But
this is a class.
I'll be honest, we don't take what we write too seriously in terms of we need to tell a really powerful message here. I think countless shows that are amazing give powerful messages and are fantastic. There's some shows that are just fun to watch and don't have even a moral behind it. And they're just like, we're having a lot of fun writing a show that we'd enjoy watching. And I think that's the takeaway. And given our previous successes with Esla Food Review, I guess I could say Esla, I said it earlier. Given our previous successes with Food Review, we know that we have an audience, and we just want to put it out there.
And your food review in and of itself has developed a pretty small but loyal and rabid following, has it not?
Yeah, as we say many times within the food reviews, we're constantly being come up to in the halls and being approached in the halls and asked, when's the next food review coming out? But yeah, no, our community at school, it's a pretty small school, but if we get half of our school to listen to what we have to say, that's, I think, pretty impressive.
It's huge. And I think it also is and I can't remember whether it was one of the founders of McDonald's or one of the other people in the food industry, and they asked, what's your secret to building a business? And I'm probably butchering this. And he said, a hungry crowd. And that's the thing you've cultivated. Mm-hmm. And one of the beauties is you're doing this in a small, big fish in a small pond. So when you have people coming and saying, when's your next thing? That's got to be a great sort of emotional driver. Mm-hmm. And they're also offering you feedback. And I don't pick up a lot of ego in this one. I just pick up a lot of, wow, this is fun. We're having so much fun with this.
It occupies the majority of my friend and I's conversations. We're just constantly talking about it. And we're also talking about it in front of our other friends. And they don't know what's going on. They don't know who these characters are. They don't know who Dr. Forst is, but we're talking about him, and or Professor Human. And there's just such a defined system and world in it. And it's just at a point of how do we best share this with people?
Do you question here? Do you think your world building in any way stems from your early love of Star Wars and other movies like of that ilk, where there were plots, there were obviously hero's journey beginnings to that, but you're just, where did the world building thing really pick up steam for you?
World building, yeah, given on what I watched, I grew up, I think, in a pretty good time for TV for kids. I think in almost a sweet spot where there was stuff being made that it's catered to both adults and kids, where the older you were, the more that you could take out of it, but you could still enjoy it if you were young. Something as like Star Wars: The Clone Wars, fantastic animated TV show that had incredible world building, and watching stuff like that from a young age inspired, I think, lots of my love for world building and facets of all of those shows and movies. But my friend and I found ourselves a lot taking inspiration from the TV we watch now for Mathman. Definitely the HBO TV show Watchmen, as well as the comic Watchmen, which we both love, and Severance. That's a very big part of Mathman. The Boys, just given that it's a superhero TV show. It's a constant balancing act of our own stuff and then our inspiration from other TV shows that obviously we make our own and we provide new spins on it. But a lot of what Mathman is, given that we take so much from, not literally take, but are inspired a lot by other TV shows, it's almost, what if you put all these TV shows in a big pot and mixed it all up with a fresh spin?
Along with math. And before can you tell us who, and I know he isn't, Mathman is a he? Mathman
yes, is Mathman is a he.
Yeah. Mathman is a he. Who did Mathman start off as? He's got tell me the initial look of Mathman. And is he hero and anti-hero?
He's an anti-hero hybrid. It started out as just Batman, but math. That was very much the design, with a bright yellow super suit. But now Mathman is very much taken his own shape within the world that we're building. And without any spoilers, who Mathman isn't so simple. And surprisingly, math isn't too prominent in Mathman. Besides the character of Mathman, who has a big, just math spelled out in his forehead and has a few math-related weapons. That's almost the extent of it, of math and Mathman. It's still taking shape, but it's very promising.
So it reminds me, and I don't know, I doubt that this was intentional, although it might have been. It seems more like by accident. You and your friend have this natural leaning towards, let's create these Trojan horses, a la what we did with the quote unquote restaurant reviews, and let's see these evolve, because there's this kind of, wait a minute, I didn't see that coming, and it's so cool that it did. There's this kind of natural hook. Walk us back for a second. What did you create at UCLA? What was the imperative at UCLA, and what did you walk with from UCLA?
At UCLA, we were tasked with writing the beginning parts of a pilot episode for your own TV show, along with creating a Bible for your TV show. And a Bible in the TV world is kind of where your show is going, plot, characters. Just if you read your Bible for Stranger Things, for example, you know what the show is and who the characters are and what happens. And I wrote a pilot for a TV show called Call of the Deep, because I spend a lot of time near the ocean, and I always am very inspired to write, or just I think a lot while I'm in the ocean, and I think a lot about the ocean, and I'm obviously intrigued about what's in the ocean. I decided, okay, I'm just going to take that and run with it. And I ended up writing a pilot about a group of kids, teenagers, who are on a research trip out in the Gulf of Mexico, in the middle of the ocean, and find themselves stuck in the middle of the ocean with nothing in sight after their captain is summoned deep into the water and disappears. And things slowly start to unravel, revealing that there is a gargantuan electric eel under the surface. Not only being an electric eel, but the energy created by the electric eel and the frequencies, whatever, is messing with their minds. And there's also the kind of draw of it. Is this even real, or are they just going crazy? Which is a little bit of both.
So it's a love story. This is so cool. And the thing I want to say, and you touched on it before, you're doing this all the while. You're just crushing it with your grade. You've been a straight A student for, talk a little bit about, if you can, about how you balance out your time. You have this sort of seamless, natural way of balancing your time. Or
Um,
is there a methodology to how does that all work?
First I'll say that my school's way of teaching is I think it's the best for me because while it's challenging, it's not challenging because you have a test every day. It's challenging because you're actually learning difficult subjects and new things. There have been times, and God knows I've talked to you about this, where I'm very stressed about whatever project, and I, it's I feel with grades being just one of the things, especially going into junior year, that are very important. It's just an indicator of commitment to a lot of colleges. It's just a resolution to myself is I'm gonna work however hard I need to work on this to get an A on it, and that's my resolution. And that helps with time management. Said if I seriously need to put other things on the back burner to focus this much on school, then I will, because right now that's my job. Why I do work sometimes at my dad's cafe, not too often, but school is the thing I need to focus on. It's probably one of the most important things I need to focus on. And I say to myself, all right, you're gonna get straight A's this year, but you're gonna need to put in the work, and you're gonna need to put in however much work is gonna be necessary to do that. So in order to work on other things that you enjoy, like Math Man and other projects, then you're gonna have to put in the work at school. And that mindset has carried me far. I'm lucky enough to have a lot of things within school come fairly naturally to me, and I haven't had to have too much outside help, and have gained a new independence because I used to need help from my dad all the time, math. But now I've gotten a lot better. It's just work on this, ask questions, like I said earlier, and just put in the focus, and before you know it, you'll have straight A.
There's the Roan recipe for
Yeah.
straight A's. I want to ask you this, and without drawing attention necessarily, although you can mention it too, how I work. Can you talk about the nature of how because we've been working together for quite a while,
Yeah.
how the way in which we work has empowered you and unlocked things inside yourself that have helped you grow and by extension help you reach into the world and help others grow. Now we've talked about the workshop. You have come to me a few times feeling stressed, and stress shows up in different ways. I've
Yeah.
never seen you like freak out, but I have seen you furrow your brow and get a little bit. Could you speak to that?
First off, I'll say, which is one of the best things, is college is really daunting. I know that because I'm in the middle of kind of that process right now. Not all the way, but it's scary. And I almost, for lack of a better word, I almost don't feel scared that much anymore about the majority of it and about what order I need to do things in. I don't need to worry about what I should be doing now because I have someone to say you could be doing this, and has an eye on like the track I should be taking on what I'm supposed to be doing. So I'm not worried about when I should be starting my college applications at this point, because I have someone to keep an eye on that for me while I'm focused on things that will actually help me get into college, as opposed to just the concept of college right now. And that has been infinitely helpful because I'm definitely not as worried about the application process. In terms of other things, it's been our mentor-mentee relationship. Definitely, I wouldn't call it therapy by any chance, by any means. But I think because I have done therapy before, it's what I like about therapy in a lot of ways, in terms of talking about what's going on in my life at the current moment and talking about what projects I'm working on, because that is just one of the things that we do on a session basis. And having an outlet to talk about what you're doing is definitely helps out with stress, because I've seen other people do it in other ways. I have like a planner and a book, but I have terrible handwriting, so I don't think that's gonna work for me. But no, having a place to just speak out loud a little bit, and sometimes about what's going on in terms of school, things stressful, in terms of what you're even going to do during the summer, about ways to make money from. It's generally confidence about college and about the future is a lot more. It's all of a sudden not entirely in your hands, which is so scary. And while you're doing what you want to do, okay, the best way I could put it is not having too much to worry yourself about the application process, so you can yourself do what would help you in the application process. That's the best way I could put it.
That's a lovely way of putting it. And again, with the idea that this isn't an ad for what I do, although this is my life's work, and you're in the process of finding your life's work and many paths towards your life's work, just as I have too. How would you describe, and very honestly, I'll just feed you. I think you know this already. I find should be paying you for our interactions. I have so much fun with these. But how would you describe our interactions overall and the way that I know how I grow from them? And you've talked about feedback loops. How would you describe our interactions? Like what's our interplay like, and how has that fueled your growth and changed what were your expectations coming in, and what are your expectations and feelings going forward?
I think one of the best parts about it is it's casual when it can be and when it should be. And it is all down to business when at times, like after day one of the workshop and I don't know what to do, it's okay, here's what we're talking about. And when we're working on a flyer, okay, talking about specific things to do. But we talked a little bit about me recommending you TV shows or you recommending me TV shows or movies. And that's just part of the normal meeting. There's just usually a banter. It's not tutoring. It's not college counselor lingo. It's very much, what can I be doing right now? And I found in other situations, I'm not dreading meetings by any sense, but in other situations, I'm like, okay, I have to do this thing in the morning. Here's the type of environment where I'd never have anything to be worried about going into a meeting, because it's very much just, what are we going to talk about today? I don't know the best way to say it, but there's nothing to really be afraid of. I know that might be weird and obvious, but it's very natural. We talk about just what I'm doing in my life in terms of what projects I'm working on. And with me, who is constantly focused on another project or another interest, and naturally turns to that, or having last weekend, having discussions about SAT or like how to properly approach that. It's very smooth and it's not intimidating. And I don't feel like there's a hierarchy. There's boundaries, as there should be, but it's very, I think, just unadulterated interest in terms of future.
And thank you for expressing it that way. And we'll end by talking about future. How are you feeling about, there's so many ways the future comes in. Are you feeling less anxious about the future? Are you feeling that sense of curiosity about the future? There's so many ways that can go. And we've started talking about schools. And what the application strategy may be for schools and different ways you can go. It's pretty safe to say we know that one of the ways you're going to lean into it will be writing, creative writing.
Yeah,
absolutely. Unlikely that you're going to go in the direction of, say, astrophysics or my favorite Mention and folk dancing. But there's a lot of different ways you can go with this. Yeah. And there are a lot of ways that these connect. How are you feeling about that process as we, the daunting thought that a year from now we'll be crafting your narrative in the application?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of feeling a lot better about the application process while still fostering a healthy or like a natural fear of it, because everyone, I can't imagine anyone's not a little bit afraid of what they're going to do for college if they're planning on going to college. And while I'm still like worried about, oh, where am I going to go? Because of course, I'm not worried about me finding my way through that process, because I don't think there'd be any situation besides like a written letter from the school of your choice saying you're in, that is going to make you stop worrying about if I'm going to get in somewhere. But I definitely feel better about my own ability and me pitching me to these schools, because it'd be one thing if applied to a school and I just did a very bad job of expressing who I was to that school and I didn't get in. That would be nothing. But if I'm actually expressing who I am in the best way possible, then I'm not as worried about that. There's certainly less excuses that way, but let's hope there won't have to be as many excuses.
And just to finish off, what would be your best advice, having gone through this, for students who may not have a mentor or may not have the opportunity to have a mentor, given that this is, well, first of all, do you feel that the process for teens and for parents alike, because I speak with your parents quite a lot, do you feel that this is a process that parents and kids would benefit from having somebody to work with, whether it's a mentor or a counselor or an in-school counselor, that nobody should go through this alone? And for people who do or don't have a mentor, what would be your best advice, having gone through this? And also, one, as a student who's mentoring and benefiting other people,
Yeah.
what would be your best, like, 3 pieces of advice for them?
In terms of just the benefits of mentorship, I know that in terms of just my own interactions with my parents involving college, usually over dinner, can often derive or often just delve into lots of emotions, and it all of a sudden becomes very stressful very quickly, and is just a very kind of wild experience that you don't really want it to be. And I think parents are constantly worrying that their kids are not doing enough for college because it is such a daunting process, and there's all these statistics showing how impossible it is to get into so and so college. I feel like looking at those statistics isn't really going to help you, because as long as you apply and make sure that you aren't scared within your application, that and you I guess that'd be my first piece of advice, is that it is nice to have a third party to filter worries and emotions around college through. In terms of just the college process, one thing that I've learned just a lot is the narrative, like you pitching you. And I could do writing, and then I could also do fishing or something, or I could have a crazy interest in fishing, and those two separate things on my college application might seem a little weird, but if you could find a way to link those together, then all of a sudden a bigger picture starts to form.
Great. And is there a third? Is there anything coming from
Hmm.
your own experience, whether it existed before or the way that you've learned to integrate things that seem disparate before? Math man and fishing and just being fearless. Because one thing that it seems to me is that you have this sort of gentle, fearless, I'm going to go for it no matter what, with that tempered by a sense of humility process that you can offer.
Yeah, I'd say, for lack of sounding cheesy, do what you want and follow your heart a little bit, because at the end of the day, if you're not doing that, then what are you even doing? What's getting you into college is not doing the things that you think the college wants to see. What's getting you into college is doing what you love to do and being passionate about it. And colleges can see if they can help you do that.
As always, I love our sessions, and I'm so grateful for your time today. Like, we went
Of
way
course.
over what we normally do, but I'll finish, and this won't go into the session. One of the things that we haven't talked about is that you've been interviewed before, but
Yeah.
this is an in-depth interview. One of the things I'd like to work on
Yeah.
with you is the
Mhm.
art of interviewing other people, whether
Mhm.
it's your teacher, whether it's the local grocer, I don't know,
Yeah.
about their experiences, because people do like to talk about themselves. And one of my beliefs is that interviewing other people makes you a better interviewee,
Mhm.
whether it comes
Yeah.
to alumni interviews, whether it comes to the interviews that you'll have for jobs or
Yeah.
auditions along the way. What's your hit on that? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I'd love to learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah. And even during the course of your workshops moving forward. And by the way, on your workshops, you said you're going to be offering different versions of the workshop. Do you have an idea about what those might look like?
I don't know what order, but probably filmmaking, like writing for TV, like scripts, short stories, and probably poetry again, because I have everything for that and it went well.
Yeah, look at poetry too. And these, do you see these as things that you could offer? This was just during the summer, that you could offer along the year
Yeah.
or
Mhm.
weekends. And
For sure.
can you say that? Because I just said it. So
Oh, yeah. No, I definitely feel that I definitely feel that in terms of my workshops, I could offer these throughout the year and have that. I'm sorry, I'm getting in my head now. But no, I feel like potentially offering a filmmaking workshop or a short story writing workshop or just generally screenwriting workshop is definitely something I'm looking forward to doing. And not exclusively during the summer, but also throughout the year.
right. And of course, monetizing that, right? This was your summer of being able to contribute to your school, but We've talked about maybe establishing a number before you go to school so that you've got some skin in the game. And we've talked about a couple of specific numbers. Can you throw out, without any guarantees, a couple of numbers that you have in mind over the next year and change? Because we're going to be working together not only through this year, but over your freshman and possibly sophomore year as well. But any numbers that you have in mind that you'd like to put together that seem realistic?
In terms of goals, I'd say definitely in the thousands through the workshop. It's definitely doable, depending on how consistently I run it. I'd say by the end of next summer, if I'm running workshops pretty consistently throughout the entire summer, could easily probably walk away with something in the realm of 2,000, maybe even more.
Great. I'm thinking even more, but so proud of you, Roan. So proud to be working with you. I'm learning a lot from you. And again, thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah, no, happy to help.
Hey, yeah, no, great. Hey, man, you're killing it. Anything else I can do to be of service today?
No, I think we covered about everything we could today.
So, Roan, thanks again. See you next Friday.
Thank you.
Okay?
See you.
Bye.